Teo. Sorry. One more time.
That's always how that has to happen. You better keep that in though.
All right, fine. I said your name wrong. We're just going to keep it in. Well, welcome to Artbeat because I'm special. Anyways, I'm so glad to have you here, Teo.
Thank you so much for having me. I know. Hey, it's a great icebreaker. Get the name wrong. It
is. Yeah. Whenever you think you're going to say something correctly is when you screw
it. Exactly. No, if you have to prep it, then you're going to definitely screw it up. That's always the way.
Exactly. But I'm so excited to have you here. I really appreciate you taking the time. So this is Johanna's Artbeat. I like to discuss first with guests how we connected. And for you, it was via my good friend, Ryan Perez, who has shout out to his podcast and Actor Despairs, which somewhat inspired this one. He's fantastic. And your wonderful manager, Mikhail Zecker. Did I say that right this time?
Mahal, but all good.
Right,
it's all good.
He's wonderful and super helpful in setting this up. So that's how we connected here. Did you know Ryan from school maybe? Or?
Yeah, I mean, basically through, those kind of channels, Stone Street, all that kind of stuff. Awesome. But the big thing is obviously Mahal, who's, just feels like very interconnected in that entire world.
She's awesome. She's been really great in setting this up. So thank you, Mahal. Okay.
Wherever you are, Mahal.
Yay, thank you. And you grew up here in New York City in Chelsea. By the way, in your bio, when you're like Chelsea, before it was Chelsea, it was fantastic.
Thank you. I feel strongly about that one.
Yeah. I don't know what it was like before, but what was that like growing up in the city? I would assume you were more exposed to the arts. I grew up in Long Island, but it's still not like right in the city. Did you get to go to a lot of shows? Did you like take the subway like the kids do now?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big thing is that like for better and for worse, you grow up very fast. So as you said, like you're exposed to just a ton of culture, not to mention just a ton of different walks of life. I mean, I couldn't tell you the first time I met people from all different, nationalities, to races, religions, you name it. Which I think is kind of an amazing way just to like already come into the world knowing that like, oh, this is a very vast expanse, not just this one city. But, conversely, you have to have some real conversations. I mean, I've asked my mom many times, when you're on the subway and you have somebody who's mentally unwell and you have to explain that to a kid. And I've watched kids, like parents have that conversation with their kids. But again, I do think that's one of those things where she did a good job of just kind of talking to me, not as a child, but as a human and explaining things in a very like, drawn down way for me at that time, but still pretty honest of like, oh, this is somebody who's going through something. So in that sense, yeah, I think it was huge. And in terms of the like train thing, the big thing was you first got to go to your friend who lived on the same block. So like just down the block, then I could go get pizza at the end of the block. Then I could go see a friend who I had to cross a street to. And then eventually I could start taking the subway.
Because I just remember like maybe like a year ago or something being out like late at night, just going to like a club or something and seeing like really young kids in the subway. I'm like, you get to go by yourself? This is like wild. This seems not safe for you.
Pre-cell phones, I literally carried like a pocket full of quarters so that I could literally just go up to a payphone and call my mom if I needed anything.
That's
smart. So I used to go to like Yankee games, and if like the game went on or like the trains were a mess, I would just literally like down in the train tunnels when we still had payphones, would just call her and be like, yeah, I'm gonna be late. Which is in retrospect very odd, and I guess especially gonna be very dated, but at the time was just what I assumed was normal.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember payphones. Yeah, I definitely grew up without cell phones too. I remember when beepers were really popular before.
Oh, I know. I was so jealous of my sister. She's
actually had a fake one because I was like, I wanted to look cool.
Yeah, of course.
My parents wouldn't get me one, so I bought like something from what was it, like one of those like goofy stores in the mall.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I had. Okay. So how about your family? Is anyone else in your family artistically inclined, or how did they feel about you going into the arts?
I'm quite the black sheep in that regard. My mom is a professor of anthropology.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So I would say that there's a little bit of a crossover in terms of like an interest in human nature and like studying them. It's just that I then, pretend to play them for a living and she's talking about it. And then my sister's in political science and my dad is an immunologist in Sweden. So very much a dichotomy that does not include acting. But everybody was extremely supportive. I was very lucky that, from day one, when I started doing plays and everything, they were completely on board. I think they were just excited to see anybody in the family that was, not trying to get a PhD.
That I guess, I mean, it could go one way where it would really
have a PhD. No, I lucked out there.
You did. That's cool. That's very impressive though, that they do. You studied at Tisch, as we mentioned earlier, and you were at their Stella Adler studio. I I know a little bit about that school. I've learned a little bit about it, but I guess they have several studios and I'm not sure. Do you get to pick? Did you pick Stone or do they
No,
just?
so it's very much feels like the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter. You kind of go
Oh, okay.
there. So you have your audition. You go away, you don't hear anything back for a long time, and then they contact you, let you know you got in, and this is the studio they put you in.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so for the most part, people just stick there. If you really felt strongly, you could change it. I know one or two kids did that, but most people were pretty happy, myself included. And so, yeah, I stayed there for 3 years, and then switched over to their film and television program. But they have something like, I want to say it's like 6 or 7 different schools there. So obviously different
Yeah, I
acting
think there's a
teams.
lot.
Mhm.
And what made you switch to Stone Street, or they just said they wanted to switch you to work together?
No. So you have to stay at one of those studios for a minimum of 2 years,
Oh, okay.
as kind of your like core studies. Then you could stay on all 4 years. I stayed on one extra year. But then for my 4th year, I just kind of wanted to try something different. And I would say, this is the case for a lot of theater programs, but there just isn't as much of a focus on the on-camera world. And obviously,
Right,
from a
yeah.
numbers game, that's where most auditions are going to come from. Because you think
Absolutely.
like, if you're casting a play, that's, let's say, 10 parts, they're going to go into rehearsals, then they're going to do the show, and that's several months. If you're casting a single episode of, Law and Order, you have that many parts for, day players. So there was just kind of a mindset of like, okay, that's probably where a lot of auditioning is going to go. And I didn't feel like I necessarily had that base yet. So wanted to just
Yeah.
kind of learn that side
It
of
is kind
things.
of different. I mean, it's still acting, but you obviously have to like hone it to be more focused on just your face.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of it, the same with stage, but it's like a lot you just learn by doing
Oh,
repetition.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so something that I did love with Stone Street is they had like this green room or room to the side where like you could literally just watch your takes from class,
Oh, nice.
which was awful at first
Oh,
because
yeah,
you
of course.
notice all the terrible things you're doing. Like my head was just constantly bobbing or moving around. But then you also learn from that and then you can kind of hone that. And so it was just a great way to get in kind of like the reps. I mean, it feels like whatever you want to call it, your 10,000 hours,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just like starting to build that up before leaving school.
That's awesome. And so
Yeah.
when you have classes like that, is it just NYU students, or since they're conservatories that like regular people like me can take, do you get mixed
Um,
in with regular people, or it's just NYU?
they keep them
Okay,
separated.
separate. Gotcha.
But like there is some crossover. You can do like, scene nights or things like that with kids in the conservatory. I don't know if it's different at some of the other studios, but that was certainly the case at Adler, is there wasn't
Okay.
too much crossover.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And did you, because I'm always curious if these schools help you like get representation at the end, did
Mhm.
you do it via school? Was there like a showcase at the end? Because I found that, like a lot of us here, it's like so hard to get
Yes.
representation. So like,
Yes.
did that help you out, or what was your path to getting
It did. I'd say there's huge caveats there, which is that I think undergrad it's getting harder and harder to leave with representation.
there? Yeah.
I was lucky on 2 parts. One was that Mahal was actually a teacher there,
Oh,
and
wow,
kind of had
cool. At
originally
Stella
was.
Adler or Stone Street?
Oh no, at Stone Street, and was kind of realizing she wanted to jump into managing. So it was
That's
kind of a leap from both ends. I mean, she hadn't done it before. We obviously hadn't been out professionally doing acting, but left with a few of us. And we've built a really strong rapport. We've stayed together this entire time. But so it's a very different, I'd say, like style to most people who are getting a manager. Is I actually knew her as a teacher, and then worked it into like a professional setting.
awesome. That's like
Um,
ideal because you already know the
Oh,
person,
it's amazing.
comfortable
And
with
she
them.
knows,
Yeah,
me very well. It's great when I need to, rant about something crazy because she
that
already
too.
knows me.
Yeah.
But no, that was really helpful. The other side was they had this, they would do kind of like, one night they'd bring in a agent, and it was for the most part commercial agents,
Yeah.
which for people out there who are still trying to get representation, I strongly recommend trying to get commercial agents, just because they can take on a ton more clients. There's always, commercial auditions going, especially for like non-union work. And it's very little skin off their back to just kind of throw you in and see what happens. So
Tell one of the commercial agents that for me then.
all right, I'll start putting the words out.
I'm just kidding.
No, but I do think like, that's where like I got to first kind of just go out with the 2 agents and just, freelance with them.
That's
That kind of
cool.
built itself into a workable relationship with like a boutique agency at first called Frontier Booking International,
Oh, I
or
think one of my friends
FBI.
with them. Yeah, yeah. They're
No,
so
lovely people.
Mhm.
John Shea, wherever you are, big old fan. But yeah, so it was with them. And so that, I started with commercial, and then signed across the board. So, got the legit side of things. And that's how I got into having both representation, and then eventually moved on to another agency. But similarly, I had just built up the credits at that point to do so. But I do think that it's a really, really hard game. If you don't get one in school and you're not going to go to a grad school program, which is totally fair. Unfortunately, I think a big part of our industry is the pay to play system, going to those nights, which I could, speak for hours on, in terms of just like, I think it's a tough reality, because it's also, from their end, it's like they don't necessarily have the time to look through a billion papers anymore. But it's really just trying to find the way in. And for me anyway, I just kind of knew that commercials was going to be somewhat easier. Because there's tons of actors that have a really hard time with it, because it is so somewhat counterintuitive to a lot of like what we work on. All of a sudden, you're kind of just being thrown into a room and asked to riff instead of like prepping this, monologue for days. Sometimes you're just walking into the room as they hand you the copy and they're like, all right, go. And for me, the kind of improv side of things was always just very relaxed. So I felt like this was going to be an easier avenue for me to get my first foot in the door, and from there, get into the legit side as well.
That's awesome. And since you mentioned commercials, you've done some, I was watching your commercial reel, you've done some fun commercials. Kevin Bacon.
I know.
I met quickly on City on a Hill. He seems really cool.
Oh yeah, he was amazing. Like, it was awesome. It was really cool. So I found out he lives not too far, or at the time lived not too far from where my high school was, which was really cool until he was like, well, you guys always were smoking cigarettes on my, porch. And I was like, well, I wasn't personally, but yeah, no, there's a little bit of suspicion there for a second. No, he was super chill. But no, he was such a nice guy. I got to meet his brother as well, because for whatever reason, the American Egg Board had hired them for the obvious eggs and bacon.
Oh yeah.
I know, it's a killer. But yeah, no, they were super sweet. And literally I was just asked to, rip on his career, which was,
it's pretty good. You're kind of
not a bad day. It's not a bad day when you get to just come in and do that to somebody who's an incredible actor, and he's just gonna smile and be nice about it.
That's awesome. And I assume he was fine with it and everything.
Oh, he was great. No, he is clearly very down to earth, understands the humor behind it. No, it was really cool. Just obviously, in any capacity you get to work with Kevin Bacon, but there was something very funny about doing so.
And really good ad. If you check out his website, it's very funny. And since we mentioned improv as well, you started doing improv when you were pretty young, right?
Yeah.
Eventually you went into UCB when you're older, but tell me what brought you into improv?
Shockingly enough, I had a obscenely active imagination. And I think at some point my mom was just like, okay, what's an avenue to do this? I'm extremely dyslexic. And so I was really averse to the idea of, having to read plays and memorize scenes. That just kind of scared me. So she enrolled me in like kind of just after school improv classes, which I did for years, and just kind of fell in love with that form, because to me, it was very, simple, in that I didn't have to memorize anything. I could just kind of riff. And then from there started doing like community, kids plays, and kind of just kept going from there.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think improv is great for any actor to have regardless.
Oh, definitely. A lot of times when I have friends who are asking like, what, I don't know, just to like stretch themselves, especially because I have so many friends who improv is very freaky to them. I mean,
it's different. Yeah, sure.
Well, again, it's just like, normally we get to prep and memorize something, and all of a sudden now I'm just asking you to throw that away. And
exactly. But it can be very freeing and fun, I think.
Exactly.
I enjoy it. And you had mentioned, I think your first audition was for a children's theater company. And like you said, with dyslexia, you were kind of hesitant to do that. And you said someone convinced you. So I'd love to hear the story of how you were convinced. First audition was like.
So it was the like artistic director of this. So it was through the after school program, but they did these semi-professional plays where, I mean, you were doing a kids play. It was something like, 5 times a week. And you're working with equity actors. For you, it's still somewhat training, but it's also a real play. And so the artistic director had just come up to me and was like, you should audition. I think I pushed off by a year because I was just like, absolutely not. That terrifies me. Finally, was like, okay, I'll do it. You have to memorize a monologue. And I had the hardest time memorizing at that point. So I would literally just like begrudgingly sit in a chair, wriggling around as my mom and I just like repeatedly ran through the lines until I could get it in my head. Went in, did it, obviously walked out of there thinking never going to hear anything about this. And then got the part for that. And then again, even more terrified because now I had to read a play. Because I mean, for the longest time, the first reading of it I was shaking. Because, you think like everybody else is going to hear all the ums and uhs when in reality, nobody's listening to any of those things. But, it takes some time to start to get that into your head.
We're always our own worst critic too.
Oh, for sure. I'm great at it. I'm my best worst critic.
And going off of that too, you've done a lot of theater too, and saying how you were worried about scripts, but you did Romeo and Juliet, you did Midsummer. How do you like approach scripts as someone with dyslexia and handle it? Is it hard for anybody who
No, but it's a really good question. It's changed a lot. In the beginning, I mean, it seriously, to her credit, it was almost all my memorization prep was with my mom, and it took a really
shout
long
out
time.
to your mom.
I know, we're Raina Rapp. But she would just run these through with me, and we would go like word by word and then line by line and then, scene by scene. And then it was sometime around college that obviously I was starting to get inundated with more and more material. So for the longest time, I mean, it was just a time intensive process. Eventually there was this class outside of NYU, and the teachers just explained it in a way that kind of just really clicked for me. But instead of trying to memorize the words, I started to memorize the beats of the scene, like this happens and this happens and this happens, and then the words kind of will fall into place. And I think going back to the improv background, I feel a lot safer with the thought. So even if it's not initially word perfect, at least especially for the audition, that's normally as key of a thing. And then slowly but surely putting the words on top of those thoughts, instead of kind of the other way around, where for the longest time I was just trying to memorize words, but not knowing why I'm saying them. So something like Shakespeare, I unfortunately do try to steer clear of the bard.
It's tough for anybody. Like I said, it doesn't have anything. It's just, some actors won't do it at all. So,
well, and I mean, conversely, I have a good friend who's dyslexic, and he is kind of the opposite. He loves Shakespeare. He finds it a lot easier because of the beats and because of kind of the rhyme.
Interesting.
That it just kind of clicks for him. Whereas for me, it's kind of the opposite. I find that like I'm in the middle of a line, I'm like, I know it's got to rhyme with thine, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And then I'm like more stuck because of that. So yeah.
Although I'm sure most people in the audience, unless they're Shakespeare expert, they're not going to know if you got that.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm always amazed by the people that are like laughing at the inside jokes in Shakespeare plays. I'm like, are you just sitting at home with like a book? Just like,
I know. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Good for them, I guess, but that's probably too complicated for me. And do you think you'll do more theater here, or do you just want to mostly, because you've been doing really well with film and TV as well? Do you
for sure. No, I love theater. I would kill to go do some theater. I think it's just the thing of like where I've been making, where I've booked, breaking into. I do still go out for theater when, the world isn't riddled with COVID and we're doing more theater. But yeah, it's just been more than anything. It's been a numbers game that I've just booked more on TV. And I do think like, when I went to Stone Street with the dyslexia, I just find that I'm an obscenely visual learner and thinker. So pretty quickly on camera work just made a lot of sense to me. Just like, oh, these are all pictures. I just got to like line these up and tell a story. Absolutely. So I think that kind of just keyed in, and especially initially out of school, it just started to make sense that was going to be an easier avenue. That being said, I mean, if I get theater auditions, I'm always super amped. I think it's just also there's less of it to cast, and times from business perspective, agents and managers are always hesitant because it means you're out of the game for a few months.
Generally doesn't pay as well. And
no, shockingly enough, who knew? Theater's not too. Not too.
But, that's good to know that. Hopefully more. It's at least it's coming back.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I literally knock on wood every day that we can keep slowly but surely actually seeing theater again, which is amazing. You don't realize how much you miss it until you just
absolutely. It's
can't have it.
It's very special. There's nothing like it. But as far as you mentioned with your TV roles, you've been doing a lot. But I wanted to just touch on one of your first roles, I think, was on Discovery Investigation or Discovery Red Rum. I feel like a lot of us do these
Yes.
these weird. I did mysteries at the museum. I was like
Yep.
a reenactment actor. Tell me about. Did you get this job on your own, or what was that experience
This
like?
was pre-agents, managers.
I
This was a
figured.
sweet actors access.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, still there, but yeah, through that, I literally, I think it was like, it was like summer off from school, and I was just like, okay, like I should audition on one of these sites. Um, I barely even remember the process. I mean, I think I went in
Good.
person for it.
You did okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it was over at Chelsea Piers. It was like the
Oh, okay.
same area as where Law and Order
Gotcha.
shoots.
Yeah,
I had no idea, obviously, that like Law and Order's there or anything. I didn't know anything. I just walking up
yeah.
to Chelsea Piers and going to audition. But yeah, I booked that. And that was literally the first time I did, I think really, I mean, anything long running on TV or even on camera, I think. I mean, other than maybe some like not even a thesis film at that point, like just,
Right.
people's like weekly projects in film classes, nothing like too intensive. So I you know, shudder to think that still exists anywhere in the world, but I am just have no concept of what I
So when
did.
you're really, really, really huge, then they'll like bring it up on a talk show. They'll be
Oh
like,
yeah, of
"You're
course.
on
No, that's
this."
if they can find that somewhere, I'll be very impressed.
I'm
But
sure it's somewhere. I'm sure it's somewhere. But I'm sure it's not that bad.
yeah, I think,
They're
and
fun.
I think that's such a rite of passage.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in many ways it's kind of become one of those things akin to Law and Order, where it's like
Yeah,
a actor in New York has to be on like a Discovery ID show.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was looking at your reel too. There's another film. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Yints or something. It looks
Yins,
really
yeah,
intense. Can you tell me a little bit? Because it looks very different than
yeah,
the other roles.
yeah. So Yins, first off, is Pittsburghese for like y'all, like you would say,
Portuguese.
like Yins ready
Okay.
to order. Yeah. So Pittsburgh, that region of Pennsylvania has a very distinctive accent.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
apparently by a lot of people's measures is like one of the more difficult American ones, because it kind of has this weird way of falling into like Midwest, Northeast coast meets a little Southern. Like it's just an odd mixture of the three. But yeah, so this was indie film we shot outside of Pittsburgh in a town called Newcastle, which is, I mean, very interesting coming from New York. It's truly like the Rust Belts kind of area
Oh,
of the
okay.
country. Again, it flash forward to like 2016. I was like, yes, I see why this part of the country changed directions.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, it's like a very, very dark comedy, but very, very dark. I mean, the director's closest vein was like Fargo.
Yeah, I can see that.
And yep. And so in that one, I played the best friend to this guy, and we had just accidentally murdered
Spoiler.
I won't say who, but we accidentally murdered someone. But yeah, it was kind of the first time that I got to really like sink my teeth into something that intense since like college. And a lot of times what I say is it was probably the first time that I watched myself on camera and was like, that was how I intended it to go. Like I'm happy with this work. Versus, I mean, not that I was unhappy with things before, but there was definitely like, oh, you know what, that didn't look the same as it did in my head.
No, I've
when I
totally been
was
there where you thought it was going to come.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
different. Yeah, you don't because you don't
Yes.
totally editing. So
Oh, of course. And I think that was just kind of a milestone of like, yep, that's how I thought like we were shooting it. And then seeing the end result was like, yeah, I think I was actually pretty on the money, which I think just takes time. And again, that's the repetition, like being on enough sets or being on enough times shooting that you go like, okay, yes, like now I understand how they vaguely edit around this. So therefore, like, what's the tone? What do I want to do with the scene? That kind of stuff.
yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. And you also worked. We mentioned SVU, and you worked on that one, the pretty
Mhm.
big NYC staple, of course. Let's chat about
Oh, of
how did you
course.
book that one and working on that show. I mean, led by Mariska Hargitay, who's been doing that show
Mhm.
for what, over 20 years now.
Yeah.
That must
Yeah.
have been quite
Yeah.
the experience.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, so that's talking about Chelsea Piers. That's where the casting office is
Right,
for
right.
that. And I'd been, fortunate enough. I've been in there a handful of times. Gotten callbacks, and that's one of the classic things is before you ever book it, you've probably been in for that casting office a ton of times. I feel like rarely is it just that like out of the blue you book from a casting director that you've never met. And so after like the trillionth time, went in, felt extremely good about it, but it was the classic thing that statistically you're never going to hear anything back. I mean,
I always assume I won't. I shouldn't think that. But
Well,
I tend
no,
to,
no, but I mean, like, but I always like if somebody asked me like a day later, like, oh, how'd that audition go? I'm always like, what audition?
yeah,
Oh, right,
exactly.
right, right,
Oh yeah,
right.
which one? Yeah,
Yeah, no,
exactly.
it's out of my head. You have to just like put it
You
out
have to
because
let it go.
you're gonna go
Absolutely.
crazy otherwise. Um, but yeah, so this was one of those ones where lo and behold, heard back. Was literally holding my niece who I was taking care of. So I had
Oh,
to be very careful not to like drop her in my
drop her.
excitement. I
I
didn't.
got us for you, drop. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think my sister would kill me. So
Oh,
didn't do that. But yeah, and it was cool. It's kind of sparked this beginning of like getting a lot of bad guys, which
yeah.
especially in school, I was mostly just going in for like the dork or the like stoner kid or the boy next door kind of things. But I personally, I'll take bad guys. I
I
was
think
kind
it's
of
probably
flattered.
more fun. I haven't gotten to play
Oh
bad, but it's
yeah, it's
probably more
way
fun.
more fun. You get to go to set and be a jerk to everybody, and people are like, "Nice job, that's amazing." Which nobody does that in the real world. They're gonna call you out.
Yeah,
But
hopefully.
yeah, and then shooting it. I mean, it's one of those things where a show that's been on that long, it's a well-oiled machine.
Right, right, right.
Everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to be. They know the timetables. Those people, they're the closest thing you'll see to like a 9 to 5
Right. Yeah.
that because most of this stuff you can't run it on anything, and most of the time you could be there for like roughly 12 hours.
Mhm.
So something like Law and Order, I think they just have that down to a machine. And Mariska Hargitay is one of the most impressive people I've ever seen. I think that's kind of an underrated field is like the procedural actor, but she's
Yeah,
been doing
definitely.
that day in and day out. She is a producer on the show. She really
Right.
helms it. You can, feel it when she walks into the room that she runs that space and commands a ton of respect with very, very good reason for why.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was a good experience. That's good to know.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and if you ever get a chance to work with Ice-T, it's going to be a
Oh, I'm
delight.
sure he's amazing. I've heard that he's just
Oh,
really cool. He just
yeah. He's
seems
just
very entertaining.
yeah, I was gonna say he's a super interesting dude, and it's amazing. You're just kind of like, wow, I just can't believe we're just
Classic.
chatting.
I
I think
see.
you like walked in with a Subway sandwich, and I was like,
Of
man,
course he did. Of course.
yeah.
I know
I
people
can,
who've been like, yo, Ice on the street. And he's like, what's up? Like, kind of
we
dude.
like finished, and I'd never had like the celebrity do this, but like we finished the scene. He's like, you want to take a picture? I was like, yeah, I guess, yeah, I think I do. Like, which was lovely. Normally I feel like I would have to be like, hey, is it cool if we take it? But he's like,
Yeah, yeah.
you
It's
probably want to take
Ice-T.
a
I think
photo.
you're probably like good.
Yeah, no, and I mean, again, I was probably going to do it, but for him to just
Funny.
automatically be like, you probably want a photo with me. I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Funny. That's a great story. That's funny.
No,
I didn't get a chance to watch all of it, but I did see that clip, and the one where you're with Kelly is the main. She comes in with the drink. That's such a good
yeah,
really
yeah, no.
great actress too. So that was
Oh no, she's amazing, and she's like, I mean, she's a theater background, and something that I think is just so impressive is like for those kind of people, because again, they're shooting this stuff like 5 days a week.
yeah.
It's a dense script. A lot of times they don't basically know their lines until they show up,
Oh
but they've been
wow.
doing this for so long that the first rehearsal is them getting the lines in their head, and then the second one is them doing it. And by the third, it's that performance. I mean, it was really impressive to watch because it's not out of like a laziness or anything. It's out of like, I get home and I got to spend time with my kids and I got to
Right. Of
do
course. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff. And then I have to get up the next day and shoot some more scenes. And,
It's true.
maybe I have an episode where I'm off, maybe, but for a lot of those people, they're in every single episode.
That's right. Yeah. Pretty much.
And so I think just to like watch somebody like her walk in and start getting it. And then by the end being like an incredible acting and scene partner. I mean, she's really like giving and receiving, which for somebody that walked in going like, okay, like looking over the script and now talking to me. And obviously, I'm here for a week. It's a guest star.
Yeah.
I've been prepping this like crazy. I'm so, ready to go. And you just see that kind of ease. That's something that, again, that takes years, but she just has it in spades.
That's awesome. That looks great.
Mm.
Definitely. And before we get into the main reason we're here, you also have a passion for politics. I've done some of that as well.
Yeah.
Tell me what's gotten you involved in like local politics. I think more people should care about that kind of stuff.
I would completely agree with you. So I think this is where I was pretty lucky. I feel like a common phrase in a lot of like American families is like, we don't talk about politics or religion at the dinner table.
Right.
And I really disagree with that.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a perfect place to talk about them. And I think it can foster really healthy dialogue. Because, politically, I'm fairly aligned with a lot of members of my family, but we do skew in certain parts. And I think what's amazing is that we have conversations. We don't really argue. We chat about it. And I think that was already a very important place. So I was already tapped in from like Bush v. Gore to like, then Kerry and then moving on. And so I've always had an interest in it, especially given the climate of the world in the last, what do you want to say, 4 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I think there was more of a pressing need to
Oh yeah,
get more
absolutely.
involved. So like initially I was always canvassing on presidential elections, things of that nature. But especially I went to Pennsylvania for Hillary,
Oh
and
wow, that's cool.
I was canvassing in, the project in a pretty
Wow.
tough neighborhood. And it really dawned on me that like somebody that looks like me comes here every 2 to 4 years, midterms and this, and checks in with some of the, people who are in some of the tougher conditions in terms of economics, socioeconomic brackets, and asks them to vote for a candidate that I think sometimes reasonably enough, they're a little disenchanted with the whole system,
Mhm.
and it hasn't
Yeah.
necessarily like yielded any fruitful results for them. Um, and that's kind of where it spawned of like, this also has to be done on a local level. So I would say like more importantly than, showing up every 2 to 4 years. And obviously, I love it when I see my friends very active on social media about that kind of stuff. But like, I think a lot of this does get done on the local level.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so, then, especially during this pandemic, and especially in that first summer in 2020, when a lot of people were, waking up to a need for social change and
Right.
really questioning like what specifically needs to be fixed in our system. Because, again, I think we saw a lot of incredible passion, especially right out of the gate, a lot of protests, which I think is a very strong and necessary part of the system. But then for me is always the question of like, all right, what does day one look like?
Mm.
Like when we get the person into office, or pass this bill, how do you implement that on day one? Like, where are you asking that money to go to? Who do you want to go, work in an office to go get something done? And I think a lot of times, reasonably enough, because it's not any of our jobs necessarily, we don't think about that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So like for me, a big area was city council, which is about the most local of the local.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
volunteered for one as well.
all right, awesome. Yeah. And so I think like, I live in Queens and Astoria. I was helping out on 2 of those. And what was so interesting was talking to folks on the ground. I mean, conversely, I went to then help out in one of the projects here in Queens, and talking to the folks there and kind of going like, what do you need? What like specifically would you need in your community to
Right.
feel like it's better? Instead of just like, hey, vote for this presidential candidate who
Right.
odds are, maybe, I mean, they're going to do some overarching things that is probably going to affect you, but you're not going to see the day to day of like, this is why.
Right.
Versus again, with a city council member, they can allocate resources directly to your block, let alone,
Exactly.
whatever your problem is. And I think, especially coming from one of these major urban centers, one that, prides itself on being extremely liberal, we have some of the largest disparity in
Mm-hmm.
economics. We have some of the largest like gaps when it comes to housing, like a
Yeah.
lot of areas that, are in dire need of fixing.
Oh, absolutely.
And I do think that, in order to tout that this is the model of, more like socially liberal policies, we also have to actually rise to that occasion and update with the times.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great. Um, let's get to the main reason though why you're here is The Walking Dead. And you play Sebastian Milton, who's the son in the show of the mayor of the Commonwealth, Pamela.
Pamela
And
Milton.
yes, and you really stood out in this role. I'm going to be honest; I'd never really watched Walking Dead before. This is my first. So I'm coming to it from someone who doesn't know it super well. But having used to live in Florida, I know that it's a pretty big Southern staple. It was filmed in Atlanta, and it has obviously a very different tone than shows here in New York City. Was this a show you had always wanted to be on, and what was? Because I know the show has some really loyal fans too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, the fan base is incredible. But so I actually had watched this like when I was still in college when season 1 came out, because this has been going on for 11 years now. And so I watched season 1 and I genuinely was really taken aback by it. I think what it did really well is that it's like a very moralistically ambiguous show.
Yeah,
and we've seen things do the like, all right, zombies are everywhere, like escape the mall and like survive. But like, I'd never seen anybody do the like, what does 2 months after you've escaped the mall look like?
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah.
X amount of the people you've known and love are dead, and like you kind of have to just move on. So I think it posed a lot of really good questions that we just haven't seen, and I think that is what probably built the tremendous base that it has now. So yeah, definitely have always wanted to be on it. And it's one of those things though, where I don't think you're ever like planning on like, yes, this year I will definitely be on The Walking Dead. It very much felt like it came out of nowhere.
Wow.
And then, yeah, I was like, all right, let's do it. It was amazing.
So tell me a little bit about the process of getting cast, like from your audition to booking it. Did you have to do several auditions? Did you go to Atlanta for callbacks and stuff like that?
So this is one of the more ridiculous ones,
Oh,
but
okay, cool.
I did one audition. It was a self-tape. It was one of those classic self-tapes that I shot at like 10 p.m. at night.
Oh,
I didn't
really?
think
Okay.
twice about it. In fact, my girlfriend, to her credit, was like, that last take wasn't too good. Let's do it one more time. Let's keep going. And kind of, pushing me to continue when I was like, I think we're good. Again, it's like, as we were saying, statistically not going to hear anything back. And that's
Right.
not pessimism or anything. I think it's just realism. Like,
Right.
I still try to swing for the fences every time, but know that, you can't make it precious. So, gave my slant on it. They weren't exactly dummy sides, but they had like changed all the names. So you couldn't
That
really
makes
figure
sense.
out,
Yeah.
who you're talking to or where you are in the world. So a big thing was just making big choices. And again, I'd known the tone of the show for a while. So I felt confident in that area. But the wild thing was I had just not like a week ago had a conversation with Mahal where I'd been working on these campaigns and was just feeling very disenchanted from acting, and was really heavily considering kind of taking a break,
Yeah.
kind of going away. So when she had heard that I was seriously in the mix, she didn't tell me for until knowing whether or not I got it, because she was just like, I don't want to contact you and then get your hopes up and then
Right.
So I was literally like about to start phone banking.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I was like sitting kind of prepping, which anybody who's done phone banking, it's very important. It can also feel a little bit draining.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So there's definitely a little bit of like mental prep, especially since it was like my 4th time in the week.
That's
And
a lot. That's impressive.
yeah, well, again, just when you're especially doing local, it's not the same, yield of volunteers that you're going to get on a national level.
Right, of course.
But so, I was prepping that, and then I get the call from her and she's like, do you have a minute? I'm like, I'm about to do this phone banking thing. And she's like, no, I think you got a minute.
Yeah.
And that's when, all the other agents get on the phone. So, okay, this is
Oh,
a big
wow.
deal.
Okay.
And they literally say, we only ever get on the phone to tell you it's really amazing news or that we're dropping you. Which one do you think it is? And
Well,
like,
they
really
actually
hope.
that.
Yeah, I mean, they're.
I just be like,
oh, I mean, my heart stopped for a second. I was like, oh gosh, I don't need another sign. But then they're like, do you remember what you auditioned for? And classically, I was like, no idea.
Yeah.
Because again, it was really cool. It was very exciting, but pretty quickly you're just like, all right, I gotta let that out of my head, because I'm not gonna hear anything. And if I make it too precious, I'm gonna be pretty devastated and bummed when 2 weeks go by and I still haven't heard anything. And that's when I know, okay, because it's not even that you get negative feedback, it's that you get no feedback on.
Oh yeah, I know. That's the thing with self-tapes. It's so annoying.
I think that's what makes it so difficult. And when people say like, oh, I could never handle the rejection, it's like, it's not rejection. It's really, because it's not that somebody says like, thank you, next, like they do in the movies or something. It's like, you just don't hear anything.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
Like I think Ryan had said that. He's like, it's like sometimes it's like I'm sending things into the void.
Yes.
Sometimes it does feel like that.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, especially during this period where everything is self-tapes, because at least, in the room, you could get a feel with the casting director of like, ooh, how did this go? Did this feel like it was good? And, this was one of those situations where classically you just send it off and you have to kind of just like take it out of your brain. I think what also really lucked out for me is because, we're still coming out with episodes. I can't really disclose like the scale of the part, but initially when they were first casting this, it was 3 episodes with possibility of more, because I think a big thing is that they write these things as they're going.
Oh, okay.
And we can get into it with the comics, but they follow the comics in certain areas and they really diverge from them in other areas, which I actually really like. I think we've seen, like, you take something like Game of Thrones, which I think actually had a really hard time trying to figure out how much it wanted to stick to the source material versus how much it wanted to diverge off. And later seasons, they started really diverging off because they had to. They were, eclipsing the books in terms of when they were coming out. But something like this actually from, I mean, really season 1 and into season 2, they already set the tone that like, we do not do everything the same way that they do in the comics. And I think that's a really cool, important moment But therefore, taking this character, they were kind of just like, all right, we're going to bring him on. We're going to see what happens. Needless to say, they did increase the count. And I think that kind of worked to my benefit, because a lot of times if this is like, let's say a 6-7 episode arc, there's a strong chance they go for a name actor, or they go for somebody that already has like more credits. And that's kind of the chicken and the egg scenario of how do you get those bigger parts without the credits? Well, credits come with bigger parts. So I do think there's kind of one of those ways where there's a lot of skill, but it also is a lot of luck. And there's that classic saying of like, opportunity meets preparedness is luck. And I agree with parts of that. I also think that there's some parts that just are so simply out of your control. Do you look the way that the casting director thought the character should look? Do you not remind the producer of their cousin that they hate, so you're better off?
True.
All that kind of stuff just comes into play, and you just don't know. I mean, I remember like my buddy had one that he thought he did so well and never heard anything for the longest time. I was like, oh, what happened? Then found out they just cut that part.
That does happen too.
Then nothing to do with him. They just cut that part.
So they changed it completely. I think I auditioned when I lived in Florida for like Bloodline via self-tape. I think they changed one part to an African-American character, the other one they changed to a man. So it was like, I can't really help that.
There's just so many factors that don't involve you. I mean, I remember like the first time I got cut from a TV show, or like we'd filmed part of it, they kept part of it, but it was supposed to be a bigger part. And they cut me, and I'm really grateful that I had some very like grounded, wise people around me to kind of help me before I would go into a full spiral of like, oh God, this was my fault. But I was playing like World War I sergeant. And this is opposite somebody who's playing F. Scott Fitzgerald. And the actor is supposed to be him through all iterations, both as a young man here, but also when he's in his 30s. And so the actor playing him looks more like he's in his 30s than he does in his 20s. I look like I'm 5 days older than a fetus, and
you are very young looking.
Yeah, well, and this was even years ago, so I was even younger looking, if that's possible. But therefore, when you think about it, it just doesn't actually look good on camera. Like, it doesn't work. But there's nothing I, as the actor, could have done there. So I mean, again, lucky enough that I had people around me, but it's so easy to go inward and to think, oh God, like if I had only done better, which at least I'm going to choose not to believe that, and really firmly believe that a lot of that is just, that wasn't the right part for me.
No, you're absolutely, I think you're right. Yeah. It's just annoying that sometimes I feel like I wish they would, because they don't like get rid of stuff. I wish they would send you that. It's like,
oh God, for your reel or something.
Just send it to me so I could at least look at it. I know you.
I mean, I don't know if you've had any of these, but like the horror stories, I have friends who've like waited for their episode to come out and then found out watching it with their family and their friends that it got cut.
I was on I was like core background on Plot Against America, and there was an episode where like it was only a couple of us singing, like maybe one or two other people, and I'm like, the camera's right on me, I was singing, this is great, I was telling everybody I knew, and then you couldn't even see me or hear me. I was like, what? But I was like, great. So I understand, and I've had friends that's happened to too. They have a line or whatever.
Well, I had another one on a TV show where it was very like heavily improv TV show, and it was great, and the scene that I did, I felt really good about it. And it was me and like 3 stand-up comedians. Like these guys know comedy. I felt like I was doing a great job of holding my own. And I remember then talking with one of the stand-up comedians afterwards, and we finished. And I was like, I think that went well. And he's like, yeah, it's a shame. And I was like, why? He's like, it's going to get cut. I was like, why? And he's like, because we all riffed for way too long. And think about it. This scene isn't actually necessary to tell the story of the episode. And this is not going to fit 22 minutes. Lo and behold, he's completely correct. It's a great little scene, but if the show was, a 40-minute show or 45, yeah, sure. But if it's trying to be tight 22 minutes, that's going to go first. And so it was just an interesting, this guy's been doing this long enough. He had a much more objective lens to just go, it's not gonna hold. Whereas for us, especially when we haven't, done a lot of work yet, every job is so precious.
I know.
You seeing the camera there. Yeah, of course. You seeing the camera there. You're like, oh God, this is my opportunity. This is the thing. Whereas, somebody like that who's been doing it long enough, I think there's so much luck to it not being precious, which obviously also comes off. I think it's a lot more, easy to view those kind of things. And therefore also from his standpoint, just easier to like go to work and, leave and not think, okay, what did I do wrong? What could I have done to like make sure I was in the final cut, when odds are it had nothing to do with you.
I never even really thought of it as doing something wrong. I was just like, why did they do that? What's wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was the
How I
malicious
thought, but,
intent?
that's a nicer, yeah. But yeah, that's the one thing with theater and film. I do theater in a way is more like the actor's medium, because with film you
Yes.
don't get to decide. That's the frustrating thing.
What I would say with film, and I think why I also really love it, is it
I do love
truly
it.
feels like a team sport.
That's true.
Like if I just did an Oscar, award-winning performance, but the boom was in the shot, or
Yeah,
the focus puller didn't get the focus right, is useless. Doesn't matter.
absolutely,
And
yeah.
so what I love is there's certain scenes and shots where like, this isn't about me. I'm just
Yeah.
there to kind of fulfill a part of the picture. And that's one of those moments where I'm doing my job for the benefit of the focus puller. I'm doing my job for the benefit of the cinematographer, the audio guy. And then we're going to get to another scene where it's really heavily focused on me, and this is my moment. And then they're going to rise to the occasion to help me get my work across.
No, it is. It's amazing how many people are sort of employed on a film or TV set. I don't think people realize how many people work.
Oh my God. It's a small army base. I mean, I mean, Walking Dead is filmed outside of Atlanta.
Okay, outside. Apologies.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine. But I mean, they obviously use Atlanta a lot, but they were one of the first to kind of set the tone that Georgia is now this place that we all go to.
Right.
But they bought it's something like 150 acre lot. So I mean, they have, just forests to go shoot at, because a lot of that show takes place in the woods.
It looks really cool too.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean, visually, there's a lot of incredible stuff there. But like when you pull up, there's like 3 parking lots basically. There's one for all the extras, which is massive because obviously you have so many zombies. Then you have this huge one for all crew. And then like last at the end is like the cast, and obviously like up a hill is where like some executive offices are. But you just see like from that image, like, oh right, this takes like a small nation state. I mean, it feels like a military base when you get there. You're just like, this has to facilitate so many people to do their job. And there's just, as you're saying, there's so many jobs that when you're watching it, you don't think twice of like, who built that piece of the furniture, or who went out and got this thing, or who's in charge of making sure there was no cup of coffee in the shot. There is somebody doing all those jobs.
That's yeah. So for this role, because I know you said that they go based it off somewhat of the comics rather. Did you do any kind of research, or just having watched it, you just
yeah. You probably can't see it in the way back, but I bought the anthology of all the comics.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, those like black books up there.
I can. It's just not. Was it in the frame? Wait. Oh, because I had that covered up. Now I can see.
Yeah.
I had notes up on the other.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
My bad. Like comics you have up there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, the Walking Dead comic, it's only like 194 issues. Like they made a ton of these. Wow. But I was also just like, I've never been cast in something that's based on source material, and I was like, that's really exciting. And it did feel kind of kismet that it is a graphic novel and not a full novel. I think I would have been a lot more reticent about going through a full novel series versus graphic. But was also kind of just like, this is such a fun and exciting thing when you get the opportunity to read through something like this and then be like, okay, now I'm going to be the first person to bring this to life. And Sebastian in the comics is an integral part. People have been waiting for this for a long time. I had stopped watching Walking Dead, just like every other actor. You have 80 other shows you have to try to watch, somewhere around like season 4 or 5.
What are they at? Like, is it 10 11? 11, right.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the spin-offs, like the 80s.
Oh my gosh. we have like 3 spin-offs in the works right now.
Yeah.
In addition to the already like 3 shows they have, plus or 2 shows plus a Talking Dead.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think you were on that, right? Or something.
Yeah. I just got to do one of those, which was super fun. But yeah, no, it's wild. It's a entire universe. But I was chatting with a friend who is has been a big fan of the comics and the show, and when he had found out that I'd gotten this, and he's not an actor, he's a nurse, and he was just like, dude, I've been reading these comics and waiting to know who's going to play this character forever, and like the shock of it being somebody that he knows was just like unreal. And that was kind of a huge moment of like, oh, the gravity, the weight of like, oh man, like people are expecting something from this. This is because again, like if it's an episode of Law and Order, I'm playing this guest star, which is great, but there's also just like, okay, like I'm gonna go to work, I know the paint by number system, and nobody is waiting for the scene with this new scummy guy that's on this episode. But again, I got like Instagram messages even before the episodes come out being like, welcome to the show, welcome to the family, like
Really?
Sebastian Stooge.
Wow.
Oh my God. I mean, I had one that was like, I want to say it was like 2 months before my first episode, and they had kept it hushed. Like there was no pictures, nothing.
Mhm.
But that's the fan base. I mean, people like
They
find
know.
ways. Oh yeah. I mean, they find
Okay.
ways to get photos from set. Like you don't know where they
Wow.
came from, but yeah, people are pretty obsessed. I mean, yeah, just outside like where they shoot in Sonoya, there's like Walking Dead tours.
Oh,
They have a little like
wow.
museum there. Yeah, I mean,
Nice.
it is a is a religion to some people.
Wow.
But yeah, no, so it's wild. But
Crazy.
seriously, I can't also stress enough. It's been like the nicest fan base. I was
Aw.
totally prepared for,
Because I
the
was
heat.
gonna say, since you're playing a hated character, do people ever like mean to you or not really?
What I mean, and I was very worried because obviously, the actor playing like Joffrey in Game of Thrones, he got a lot of shtick. And this has happened before, like Star Wars has had this where
Yeah.
your fan base get really vocal. So I was definitely a little concerned. I think I was luckily kind of, I don't know, just at an age and experience where I was like, you know what, if I do get any of that, I'm really going to do my best to not concern myself with it. It's not my job.
Right. Of course.
I mean, so far at least, and knock on wood, but I have yet to get like any negative messages. Everybody has
Oh,
been
good.
really, really, really sweet. I've gotten a ton of people being like, I'd love to hate you, but you're doing a great job. Which is amazing. It's really sweet. And again, no shtick, but like as somebody who I'm a huge fan of things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and that kind of stuff, I have very strong opinions when we create new content in those realms or new characters are added. And so I know what that feeling is like as a fan, and to get positive reception from the fans, I mean honestly is bigger than like any article or anything else. Is just hearing from people that have been watching this forever,
Oh
like, yeah,
yeah.
that's what I've been wanting, that's what I've been waiting for.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the best too.
Mhm.
And as far as, because I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I know
Yeah.
you have fight training as well, and the
Mhm.
show gets pretty physical, not to spoil anything, but can you
Yes.
tell me without doing that, like a little bit about preparing and doing stunts on this show? Because
Oh
obviously
yeah.
it's a show where people get bloody, they get,
Oh yeah,
hurt
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, they have gallons of blood on that set. It's
That's
wild.
true. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so two parters is, again, this is where you're lucky when you're on a show of this scale. I had a stunt double for any like intense stuff, like prepped and ready to go. And we kind of walk through and figure out like, am I going to need my stunt double for some of these things? So, my first episode, it's not really spoiling much, but I get punched in the face.
Right. Right.
Good reason. Good
yeah. Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah. He does. Yeah.
Definitely a little bit of a turd. But there was literally a guy waiting on standby. It's not a too demanding of a thing, and I had done enough fight choreography that I knew how to take that, so it wasn't a problem. But yeah, at all times, if you need it, there's a guy there who I mean, so obscenely well trained, and I'm actually become really good friends with the guy who is my double. I mean, he's been doing that for years and years and years. He is prepped and ready to fall down stairs. He's ready to like, be shot. I mean, it's ridiculous, but like they're really good at what they do. And
Yeah.
the other part is just a show that's been on this long, the safety protocols are incredible. I mean,
That's
to
good.
get a little like heavier, we were shooting stuff while everything that had come out from
Mexico.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And Walking Dead has a ton of firearms on that set, but like another department that people don't normally think about is the armorer.
Right.
So in our case, ours is a guy who is a veteran of the U.S. Rangers for, I mean, he was something like 15 or 20 years. He's been doing this forever. He's worked under some of the biggest names in the industry, and at no point did if anybody is handing around a firearm, do you feel unsafe, because everybody on the entire set is allowed to come look at it. I mean, they encourage you to do so, even if you're the person who's bringing lattes over. Like, if you don't feel comfortable and you want to see it, they will show it to you. Anytime where we don't need it to be metal or don't need it to be in any way firing, it's normally rubber. That goes for almost all weapons on these kind of things, which I think is, I mean, unfortunately, it should be more of a standard for things.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I think it's a good mixture between, I luckily have the background and experience, but also you just very lucky with a show like that to be working with some of the best. And it felt like that from day one. I never at any point was like, oh, this feels a little weird or anything. And a lot of times, I think, especially with film and television, because it's moving so fast, actors will kind of get nervous about asking questions, but a
Yeah,
big thing is
sometimes.
just
Yeah.
really taking space and being like, wait, I want to just go over that one more time. There was a part where I was like, had to, fight with a zombie. But the good
Right.
news is that a lot of times if you're fighting with a zombie, the zombie is a stunt actor. So
Oh,
like
okay.
they know what they're doing, and like therefore they kind of know how to make they know how to make you look cool, while they're doing a lot more of the like intensive work, especially because if you're an actor and you don't normally fight zombies, your adrenaline's pumping, you're pretty excited
I'd
about
be pretty
this.
nervous.
Yeah, reasonably enough. But they do an amazing job of also getting your back, not to mention, making the scene look as good as it does. But truly in those kind of intensive things, I mean, it's a reason that I do think at like the Academy Awards, the two shocking departments that we haven't really like given credit to are stunt performers and
Yeah.
casting directors. I
Yeah,
think it's
absolutely.
dreadful. But yeah, no, because I you see on all those kind of shows, it's the fact that you don't see it is what makes it so impressive.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, I personally, like, if I had to do a stunt in something, I'd be like, you can do it. I don't like, I'd probably hurt myself. But yeah, and I'm assuming when you're like really like the top billed person, they probably don't even like want to let you do that kind of.
Oh God, no,
You're
no,
probably
no,
like too
no.
much insurance, too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say no. I don't think you're allowed to at that
Yeah,
point.
it's crazy.
Mhm.
But it is kind of cool that you got to do some because you had the experience and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Just to touch briefly on your character, I know you said that you knew the comics and stuff, but what was it like coming into the show that's already really established? What was that
Yeah.
experience like? And did you do any like trying to like bond with like Layla Robbins, who plays your mom? And do you think, sorry to add all these things in, but do you think
Yeah.
like he had like, maybe part of the reason why he's such a jerk is because he was kind of privileged upbringing? Like, did they give
Yeah.
any hints as to his background, I guess?
So first let's start with coming onto that show. I was terrified. I like
Oh,
it was the largest scale I'd done. Yeah, you're like every other time, you're just worried, like, oh God, like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop and somebody come up like, oh, actually, you're fired. And so you're very stressed. I was very, very lucky. The guy who pops me in the face in that first scene, Josh McDermott, is one of the most like wonderful actors I've ever gotten to
oh,
work with. He's a really sweet human being. But right after our fight call, we were just getting to talking, and I felt like I could open up to him. I was like, hey, I'm really excited to be here, but it's really scary. He was
yeah.
like, dude, that totally makes sense. I was there with you. He came on in season, I believe it's 4 or 5. And he was terrified. And Andrew Lincoln, who's was the face of the show for the longest time.
Mhm.
Uh, I have never met this guy or yet to meet this guy, but he is the reputation that he has left behind on that show is unbelievable. He is
Mhm.
purported to just be the nicest human being. Drove down from Atlanta, even though he wasn't working that day, to meet Josh when he came on the show.
Wow.
Yeah, like really good person, and just set the tone for that kind of stuff on that show. So it really does feel like a show where everybody picks each other up, lifts each other up, and
Good.
wants everybody to do the best work. So I feel like I got kind of the best way into that. Um, when it comes to background work or working with somebody like Lila, who's an amazing, amazing actor, we didn't actually get to really like meet a lot before working together that first time. But then like just by proxy of being down there, we would meet up, kind of chat about certain aspects of the character. But then both of us went off and did our own background. And that was kind of a thing about it, is you're given a lot of license to like go off, do what
Good.
you need, come back. And again, because I think the show is they're like writing a lot of the time while you're going through it, they're still figuring it out, and you're getting a lot of license to kind of do it with them. But like in that first episode, I'm still trying to figure out like, is this guy clinically like a sociopath, or is he, as we're saying, like somebody who is much more on the side of like, this is a kid who was built, born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and there's
Maybe.
probably more complexity to it. And I chose to kind of go with the complexity side of things, and was pretty quickly, backed by a lot of the producers in terms of like, yeah, that's a good direction for this. Because again, they don't actually give you a lot with something on this scale. Because even we're lucky we would get to read the entire script for our episode, but like back in the first few seasons, those actors were getting like half the script at a time.
Wow.
So sometimes actors wouldn't know that their character dies in that episode until like lunchtime. And then
Well,
they
I
find
guess
out.
in some ways you wouldn't know if you're going to die in real life.
No, I guess, yeah.
But that's, whoa, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and so again, very lucky, like we would get to read the episodes, but there was definitely a lot of kind of like almost like detective work as each episode would come in to my hands of like, okay, what backs up my hypothesis as to who this guy is right now? Oh, like that's an interesting turn. Or, working with certain directors, they're going to really give you a lot of things to work with. Other ones are very, hands off, laissez-faire. They really want to see what you do,
Right.
and only give like technical notes. But I think that's a big thing, especially on camera work, is as the actor, knowing when you need to ask for something, but also knowing that like if nobody's coming up to say anything to you, it probably just means you're doing your job, and it doesn't mean like, oh God, what am I doing wrong or anything like that. It just means just keep doing it, change it up a little bit here and there, but keep doing that. And so when it comes to like the background work, as you're saying, like a big thing for me was the character in the comic books. He has some pretty big moments, but almost all of his stuff is very action driven. Nobody's really necessarily telling you who he is. He's not expounding on who he is. So there's a lot of room for you to decide who this character is, not just based on like what he does as actions. But I'm a firm believer that unless you're playing like some, character from the seventh rung of hell, or, like a serial killer who is like, mentally unwell, you're not gonna, like, most people, A, they don't believe they're evil, and B, there's more to it, and
exactly.
I think that was a really important thing with a job like this, is kind of going like, okay, even if he is supposed to be detested by people, I can't detest him. I have to reason why I would do the things I'm doing, and give license for also reason that anybody watching could go, okay, but as awful as it is, I see why this person did that.
Exactly.
And so obviously we'll see as everything comes out if that all came to fruition, but it was definitely a huge impetus for me going through it. And I think there's also just a multitude of different ways in terms of background study, background work that you do. I remember working with an actor who said, that they never use all the same tools twice for a job. They switch it up depending on what kind of job they're on. And that was something I took to heart with this, is that, I've learned obviously from different schools, different teachers, all these different ways of, going about dropping into a part. And I definitely adopted things for this that I haven't used for previous things. I went to classic methods I've used for years, and some things that I haven't used in forever, but decided like, oh, actually this really works for this part.
Absolutely. And you still have a few more episodes, I think, at least one or two more episodes coming.
Oh,
so more to see from Sebastian's character.
Yeah, we got some time.
Sebastian character. So as we wrap things up, I just want to ask quickly, we kind of touched on this earlier, but I like to ask all my guests if they can think about a time when they were thinking they were going to give up their career. Maybe you kind of had that during the pandemic, but if you can expand on a little more and just tell me what kept you going through. Because I feel like for me, that's inspiring for someone who's still trying to make it.
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, I feel like we do that about once a week. So
exactly. That's true.
I was going to say, normally when I'm talking to my friend, I'm like, all right, are you in the middle of a life crisis, or are we good? Where are we? So I do think, there's parts of that just, I think a really important part is surrounding yourself by other artists, other people kind of in the same struggle, because it's a very insular business. You're your own company. You, as we were talking about before, you send in this audition, and then that's it. And all you have left is your headspace. And that can be a very tough place to be in sometimes, especially if it's negative. So obviously something like taking the break to go, take a break from acting when during this pandemic, a big thing there was that I wasn't getting a lot of auditions. I wasn't feeling very fulfilled with a lot of the auditions. And that's where something like going to politics, it was also just like a need to feel more fulfilled in doing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got that feeling from it. And so I would say no matter what, constantly trying to find what that is. And it doesn't always have to be acting. Like it can be going off, taking a break, doing something else, coming back. Obviously something like this podcast, I think, is an awesome idea.
Oh, thanks.
No, seriously, because I think like fulfills that artistic need. But also again, like having dialogue. I'm actually really always a fan of coming on podcasts because they've been immensely helpful.
Cool.
I just like have found, some of the toughest times as an actor when I'm really not feeling it, I have gone to listen to interviews with actors. Normally, that's not just like on some talk show where they're talking about the next movie they're in, but actually talking about like the highs and the lows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be very inspiring to hear people get through that. And like,
well, I think because you realize that doesn't go away. Like it
Oh,
doesn't.
it doesn't. Yeah. Even for, which
Mhm.
is shocking. You would hope that it would, but I guess not.
But I think there's something kind of humbling about that.
That's
And
true.
there's like, as weird as, I mean, I totally agree with you. I would hope that it, at some point you're like, all right, and now I'm good. And now I'm confident and I will never, waver. But there's also something like, oh, right, nothing changes. Like,
Right.
when these episodes started coming out, there was a moment where I was talking with one of my buddies and just kind of trying to explain to him, like, nothing feels different. Obviously everything feels slightly different because, there's more notoriety than I had before. But also nothing feels different. It
Mhm.
feels like the exact same me, the same, fears and neuroses and the
Yeah.
same things that I'm confident about. But yeah, so I would say probably one of the biggest ones was most recently, but a big part of that was just kind of the need to continue to fill up. I mean, I think as an actor, you're constantly trying to, a friend says this and I really agree with it, but like carbonate yourself, like you're trying to like
Mm,
fill
yeah.
up. And
It's a good
in
one.
this case right now, when there wasn't a lot of auditions, it wasn't necessarily going to come from acting. I really
Right.
lucked out because this job came along and I got to go do it, and I felt like I was in the right
Did you
headspace
get
to
it like during like 2020 or something, or during
I
the?
got it like in 21.
Oh, okay. So when
But
it's starting to pick up and stuff.
yeah. But it was still kind of like we were like, are we coming out of this pandemic or not?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so in that time, just going off and doing campaign work felt really good. It felt
You're
like I got to
making a
go home.
difference. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was also like working at a food pantry. And again, it was just one of those things where it was really good for myself. And again, like, hey, it's amazing to know that you're making a difference and helping other people, but it's also like okay that can be helping you.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think there's no like shame or no need to like pretend that like this is exclusively a selfless thing. Like
No,
it
of course
it
not.
truly was like nice to go somewhere and be like, all right, I am needed, I am useful.
Yeah,
Because a lot of
absolutely.
times I think actors contend with like, is this useful? Is this
Yeah. I'm
necessary?
like, what am I doing? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how can you not? And I think the reality is that, we're all trying to work towards doing that art that we, want to be,
To
telling
make it
everyone
to
like
make
this.
a difference or to touch
Mhm.
someone. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
Absolutely.
And the good news is I think a lot of times we end up doing it a lot more often than we think we do.
Hmm.
Um, I remember doing this little play that, I felt really great doing, but again, it wasn't like viewed by a lot of people. And bumping into some guy at an audience at another play, and he like pulled me aside to be like, "Hey, I saw you in that. And it was amazing."
Yeah,
And
that's
again, this
really
was like
special when people do that.
random. Yeah, exactly. But it was one of those
Great.
moments where like I wouldn't have even thought twice about that. I would have gone on to the next project and gone like, "Well, that's not the art yet. that's something else." When in reality, maybe it's possible that you're kind of already that actor and already that
True.
artist, and we're
Yeah.
all we're all works in progress.
It's very true. All right. Well, I could talk to you all day. This has been a wonderful conversation, but I don't want to
Yeah.
keep you forever. You have other things to do. So just to let's just let people listening know when to watch The Walking Dead, where they can follow you and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So The Walking Dead is coming out Sunday nights. You can watch that on AMC or AMC Plus, which you can get through Amazon Prime. And I'm on Instagram, TT Rap. Please follow me. I'm a delight and lovely human being. As always, I'm
Much
the
nicer than your character, I can attest.
I thank you. Oh, good.
Much nicer than
That
much
was
nicer.
one of the highest praises I got from one of the producers. Is like, I've heard that you're way nicer than your character. I
Yeah,
was like,
that's good.
yes. But yeah, and seriously, thank you so much for making the time. This
Yeah,
was awesome. I'm always so happy to just chat with other artists about the business and
yeah,
about
absolutely.
you. It's pretty crazy, and as I said, it can oftentimes feel very, insular and bitterly lonesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Teo. I really
All right,
appreciate
you have a
it.
nice one.
Thanks.